F. Scott Fitzgerald is the chronicler of the American dream's dark underbelly, a writer who exposed the glittering facade of wealth and privilege to reveal the rot of disillusionment beneath. His life was a combustible mix of genius, excess, and tragedy, marked by breathtaking literary triumphs and catastrophic personal failures. Fitzgerald's story is one you need to hear because it's a stark reminder that the most beautiful writing often emerges from the darkest corners of the human experience. Fitzgerald's early life was marked by a sense of disconnection and yearning, a feeling that would later become a hallmark of his writing. Born in St. Paul, Minnesota, he grew up in a family that struggled financially, his father's failures as a businessman a constant source of tension. This instability would shape Fitzgerald's views on class and the American dream, themes he'd later explore with devastating precision in works like The Great Gatsby. As a young boy, Fitzgerald found solace in writing, pouring his emotions onto the page with a fervor that bordered on obsession. He was especially drawn to the romanticism of Edgar Allan Poe and the realism of Henry James, authors who'd influence his unique blend of lyricism and sharp social commentary. At Princeton, Fitzgerald's literary ambitions took shape under the guidance of mentors like John Peel Bishop and Edmund Wilson, friendships that would last a lifetime and provide a sense of belonging he often lacked in his personal life. Fitzgerald's time at Princeton was marked by both academic struggles and literary triumphs. He was drawn to the school's vibrant theatrical scene, writing scripts for the Triangle Club and developing a flair for drama that would serve him well in his later novels. However, his poor grades and lack of focus led to him dropping out, a decision that would haunt him for years to come. Despite this setback, Fitzgerald's writing continued to flourish, with early stories like The Romantic Egotist showcasing his emerging talent for capturing the angst and disillusionment of his generation. It was during this period that Fitzgerald began to develop his unique narrative voice, one that blended the poetic sensibilities of Poe with the psychological insights of James. His writing was marked by a sense of urgency and intensity, as if he was racing against time to capture the essence of his characters and their world. This voice would become a hallmark of his major works, including This Side of Paradise and Tender is the Night, novels that probed the darker aspects of the American experience with unflinching honesty. Fitzgerald's relationships with his contemporaries were complex and often fraught, reflecting the tumultuous literary landscape of the time. He was drawn to the likes of Hemingway and Dos Passos, writers who shared his commitment to realism and his disdain for sentimentalism. However, he also struggled with feelings of inadequacy and competition, particularly in regards to Hemingway, whose sparse, direct style seemed to embody the very essence of modernity. Despite these tensions, Fitzgerald's friendships with these writers would prove instrumental in shaping his literary vision, pushing him to experiment with new forms and techniques that would ultimately redefine the boundaries of American fiction. Fitzgerald's relationship with Zelda Sayre, a Southern belle he met in Montgomery, Alabama, marked a turning point in his life and writing. Their romance was tumultuous, with Fitzgerald drawn to Zelda's vivacity and beauty, even as her mental health struggles and his own insecurities threatened to upend their union. This fragile dynamic would later inform the complex portrayals of love and marriage in novels like Tender is the Night, with the lines between reality and fiction blurred. As Fitzgerald's literary star rose, so did his reputation for excess and decadence. His affinity for alcohol, particularly gin, became notorious, with stories of his binges and blackouts spreading throughout literary circles. This self-destructive streak was mirrored in his writing, where characters like J. Gatsby and Dick Diver embodied the darker aspects of the American dream. Fitzgerald's own struggles with identity, class, and the search for meaning were reflected in these characters, giving his work a sense of raw, unvarnished truth. The influence of other writers on Fitzgerald's style and themes cannot be overstated. At the same time, his admiration for the old masters like Poe and James continued to shape his unique blend of lyricism and social commentary. This synthesis of influences would ultimately yield some of Fitzgerald's most enduring works, including The Diamond, As Big as the Ritz, and The Crack-Up, essays that probed the very fabric of American society with unflinching candor. Fitzgerald's experiences during World War I also left an indelible mark on his writing. His time in the army, though cut short by the armistice, gave him a glimpse into the abyss of human suffering and the disillusionment that followed. This sense of moral dislocation would later inform his portrayal of the Lost Generation, a group of young Americans adrift in a world that seemed to have lost its way. In works like Tender as the Night, Fitzgerald captured the anguish and despair of this generation, laying bare the rot of decadence and corruption that had eaten away at the American dream. Fitzgerald's relationship with Zelda continued to deteriorate as his drinking worsened and her mental health struggles intensified. The couple's life became a blur of parties, hospitalizations, and temporary separations. Despite this turmoil, Fitzgerald remained drawn to Zelda, and their complex dynamic continued to fuel his writing. In works like Tender as the Night, he probed the darker aspects of love and marriage, laying bare the rot of decadence and corruption that had eaten away at the American dream. As the 1930s wore on, Fitzgerald's literary output slowed and his personal life became increasingly chaotic. He struggled with debt, illness, and the decline of his reputation, which had been built on the success of novels like The Great Gatsby and Tender as the Night. The latter, in particular, was a deeply personal work, one that explored the complexities of love, marriage, and identity through the eyes of Dick and Nicole Diver. This novel, with its non-linear narrative and poetic prose, marked a significant departure from Fitzgerald's earlier work, showcasing his growing experimentation with form and technique. Fitzgerald's friendships with other writers also began to fray during this period. His rivalry with Hemingway in particular had become legendary, with the two men engaging in a series of public feuds and private criticisms. Despite these tensions, however, Fitzgerald continued to admire Hemingway's work, seeing in it a spare, direct beauty that he sought to emulate in his own writing. This influence can be seen in stories like The Crack-Up, where Fitzgerald adopted a more minimalist style, stripping away the ornamentation of his earlier work to reveal the raw, unvarnished truth of his characters' lives. The historical context of the time also played a significant role in shaping Fitzgerald's work. The Great Depression had cast a pall over American society, and the lost generation, which Fitzgerald had once chronicled with such flair, now seemed like a relic of a bygone era. As the country struggled to come to terms with its newfound poverty and disillusionment, Fitzgerald's writing began to take on a more elegiac tone, mourning the loss of a world that had once seemed so full of promise. In essays like The Crack-Up, he probed the very fabric of American society, laying bare the rot of decadence and corruption that had eaten away at the nation's soul. Fitzgerald's struggles with his own identity and sense of purpose also deepened during this period. He felt increasingly disconnected from the world around him, unable to recapture the magic of his earlier writing, or to find a new voice that spoke to the changing times. This sense of dislocation is palpable in works like The Last Tycoon, an unfinished novel that explores the decline of the American dream through the eyes of a Hollywood mogul. The novel's protagonist, Monroe Starr, is a figure of tragic grandeur, a man who embodies the contradictions of the American experience, its optimism and despair, its beauty and ugliness. Fitzgerald's life was a testament to the enduring power of art to capture the human condition, with all its complexities and contradictions. He got right the essence of the American experience, laying bare its beauty and ugliness, its optimism and despair. What he left behind is a body of work that continues to haunt us, a reminder of the fragility of the human spirit and the elusiveness of the American dream. As he once wrote, "So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past, a line that sums up the futility and longing that defined his life and work." Fitzgerald's legacy is a powerful reminder that true art is not about providing answers, but about asking the right questions, and it's this quality that continues to make his work feel urgent and relevant today. Like this episode if it hit true. Share it if you respect honest talk about authors. Subscribe because we'll do this again. This is Ernest, signing off.